Again, it's Spawn measuring with the leg kick quickly.
You have two southpaws going at it. It's going to be interesting to see who implements that imaginary line. I talked about it last Hard Knocks, and the idea that there's an imaginary line between both fighters, and whoever commits to crossing that line will start imposing their will. And right now, they both have a feeling out. Obviously, Flavio is trying to get that distance and kind of check it, because again, we talked about it. Dan has the reach, both in his fists and his feet. It's going to be Flavio who needs to put his will of pressure.
And again, this start indicative of what we were talking about earlier when you see the difference between amateurs and professionals. They are going to measure, they are going to find their range, they are going to figure out where the other guy's holes are before they're going to attack. It certainly becomes more of a 15-minute chess match than a 15-second grudge match.
Yes, and it also helps the cause to do so when you start taking on the middleweights and up. Every single punch will count. There you have it. The explosiveness of Dan right there. If he was to touch and cross that line and get that button, it could be lights out.
Yeah, Dan Spawn certainly capable of putting somebody on their back with two 10-second knockouts, but could be in trouble here as Flavio Magon landed a right hand that seemed to stagger Dan Spawn.
Even if it didn't connect, it was the ability to go forward and get what he wants. He is in a dominant position, and this is where his jiu-jitsu can reign supreme.
On top now is Magon.
Again, this is where the actual advantage will be, being the smaller fighter. Your center of mass is equally spread out, and it's the ability to hold that and actually get some pressure and go for, let's say, the elbow that we were talking with Nick in the previous matches. The idea that, again, this is where Flavio needs to get some space and drop some elbows and inflict some pain.
And there's been a couple elbows already on the top from Magon, now punishing the midsection of Dan Spawn, trying to find an opening. It's that soften him up, and you can look for a submission because you force him to defend somewhere else, yep, which allows you to find a submission somewhere else.
One of the things you need to look at the diagonal line that Flavio has on his opponent. Dan underneath him is considered, again, if you're going to look at it, it's an S. That's where your power comes from. Both ends, either your kick and your punch from both sides of, let's say, the shoulder or the hips. And when Flavio is able to pull that S and flatten it out to, let's say, a diagonal line, that's where the rest of the power and the ability to escape in a situation like this.
And you can already see a mark on the leg from Dan Spawn. That gives you an indication of what Flavio's kicks have done. And Flavio on top now and continuing to grind. Now 2 minutes left in the first round as Flavio Magon now trying to find the back of Dan Spawn. Again, Spawn had trouble the last time he was here, suffering a loss to Rodney Wallace because he could not get off the ground. And we'll see if he's able to here, but Magon doing a good job of advancing his position and now taking the back of Spawn.
That's exactly right. He obviously looked at the tape of Dan in the sense that there are weaknesses, and if you were able to inflict the same game plan as someone that did so successfully, one would have to assume the same success would be onto you. And if not, even though Flavio has not been getting, let's say, any shots off, there is control, there is a grueling pace of just riding someone as a backpack. Being the backpack is very demoralizing and also physically taxing. Dan will probably make it to the next round, but you've got to think that he's in the deficit of confidence.
Just 1 minute remaining here in the first of 3 rounds here in this main event between Dan Spawn and Flavio Magon. Spawn doing a little better here to escape the clutches, but now those hooks are in, and you can look for Magon to try and flatten Spawn out, but he's got short time left to do so with just 40 seconds remaining in round 1.
Yes, Flavio just really needs to just kind of keep doing what he's doing. It's not pretty, it's really ugly, but grueling. And like we said, here's where he's starting to open up and making it basically rain punishment on his opponent, who he's been controlling this whole round.
And those punches to the midsection landing as well. You can hear them land from our broadcast position on the other side of the cage. And Dan Spawn looks like he may escape here in round number 1 and get to round 2 with just 10 seconds to go. But it's been a round that got to the ground, and once it did, it was all Flavio Magon. in round number 2. 3 5-minute rounds here in this main event of Hard Knocks 53 from Calgary, Alberta, Canada.
I want to see Dan start to put out punches. The jab is his best friend. With this much reach, you can't kick the inside of a fellow southpaw like that and expect him not to try and grab you, clear the distance, and do exactly what he just did. Dan really needs to start adding more layers to his actual attacks. I need to see a jab.
Tries the head kick there, but it doesn't quite get through. I believe Spawn said this is the first time he's fought a southpaw, and Flavio saying that he fights southpaws a lot. That may play into this too, with the inexperience of fighting across from a guy that stands with you on the same side as opposed to fighting a right-hander.
And there you have it. Even with that trouble, Dan shows it's standing on its feet. He has a very good chance of turning the lights off. In many ways, I think Flavio is still trying to put together the cobwebs, although it might not show per se, but he's not being as aggressive now.
Spawn keeping his distance from Magon in this round, but landing more strikes than he did in the early part of round 1. A little more aggressive a fighter here in round 2 is Spawn. Of course, I'm sure that's a reflection of what happened in round 1. Knowing he's down 1, he's got to come out and get a win in round 2 to give himself a chance to win the fight.
Yes, and he's doing that with putting his shots straight down the pipe and hitting Flavio right in the face. It helps when you have such a big target on the red top of Flavio. But I love his shorts, so.
Front kick there earlier, and now Flavio comes over. Spawn hits a big right hand and is now raining punches on Magon. Magon defending, but Spawn is landing huge punches now.
Yes, that was a clear drop. There was many ways where I thought this fight was gonna stop, but credit to Flavio, he's holding him now. He has some time to get his cobwebs together, clear the cobwebs, and get to where he needs to be. He needs to hold him now for the next little bit, maybe kind of push himself in some way regards to the cage, but here he has some success in tying it up, but he needs to get his back to the cage. I think that is his best bet. Having space and being in the middle of the cage would work to, I would think, his downfall, in the sense of Dan can continue to be on top.
Yeah, Spawn doing a good job on top so far of landing punches to the midsection, punches to the ribs, and then kind of that body head, throwing an elbow there that lands on the eye. Another one on the cheekbone of Flavio Magon, and Dan Spawn with an explosive right hand and a big elbow there. That one landed solid.
Yes, and we can see the blood coming out of Fabio's already had red head in regards to the paint, but this one is very real. I think Dan's doing a great job in using his reach in this regard. Although he wasn't maybe as successful in the first round, he's taking that same transition in regards to the second round of getting those shots down the middle, but coming off of different angles when he's in ground and pound. This is where you can use the reach. We talked about it before, in the sense that this is where you can use all of gravity in your benefit.
Again, punches in bunches from the top from Dan Spawn, and he has landed a number of elbows that have bloodied his opponent. Flavio Magon, after such a dominant round 1 on the ground, is eating a damage here on the ground in round 2, and Dan Spawn is swarming.
Yes, and it's not pretty, but it is very much successful. One might not call him an artist. I would, maybe Meryl Streep wouldn't, but I think in many ways he is painting a very bloody canvas with his opponent.
Yeah, absolutely. Dan Spawn is making a mess in there right now, both of our canvas and of Flavio Magon.
Oil painting, nonetheless.
Spawn now on top, working his game. Again, it's been the same thing since this has gone down to the ground with Spawn on top. It's been punch, punch, elbow, punch, punch, elbow, and so far so good for what's going on here with Dan Spawn as he continues to just work very effectively from the top.
Yes, it's messy, not even talking about the blood, the sweat. It's just effective nonetheless. Again, if you can't see where the punches are coming via both the elbows coming down on you or the blood in your eyes, it's very successful.
carrying the momentum into this third round as Flavio Magon is carrying some goose eggs from the elbows, and that a sharp kick that drew an ooh from the crowd here at the Mark and McPhail Center.
Which is definitely a good gauge of how bad it hurt. If you can hear it, if you can feel it, if it makes you cringe, you know it worked.
And it certainly was that, as Dan Spahn continues to look for an opening here. Flavio Magon very good on the ground in round number 1. Spahn carrying the action in round number 2, and you might think that both of them think they have a round, and so now it becomes about not making mistakes rather than finishing the fight. And that can be what separates the guys in the UFC from guys fighting here. These guys are looking to get to the sport's highest level, and that killer instinct can be a big part of that.
Yes, yes, very much so. And even with Dan, again, putting the pressure and showing that any punch could finish this, Flavio, before that, threw his own combination. So both men are very much in this fight and very much have a chance. And if you see Flavio kicking Dan like that, it's going to start chipping away at the pep in his step. And he's not going to be able to cross that line and get a hold of Flavio. So Flavio needs to be more active, but I like what he's doing, and especially after a round where he was on the bottom in such a violent way.
Dan Spahn landing a couple shots there. Magon keeps coming forward. Again, both fighters landed a big punch that led to a takedown, that led to dominant ground game in each of the rounds. Both fighters exchanging that, and Spahn certainly looking fresher here. And it's an unfortunate consequence of having some cuts as Spahn lands a couple nice punches. When you're bleeding like that, all that's going to do is put in the mind of the judges that you're bleeding and that the other guy has done much more damage than you have. Even if you're both still landing solid punches, it's the damage that's going to look that way.
Yes, yes. If you are noticing it, everyone else is noticing it. And everything that in many ways seems like just a little nod, just a little movement, in many ways is picked up by everyone watching.
Yeah, Spahn's really held the edge of the striking here in the last 90 seconds or so as he's landed a couple different combinations. Flavio now trying to increase his pace, increase his step, kind of that try and find an opening here. But Spahn, you got to think, has got to be feeling comfortable at the moment with his performance here in the third round as he lands another punch after 2 go awry. And that kick coming from Flavio, but answered quickly by a few punches from Dan Spahn.
Yes, Dan's just taking it away at this point. You can see in many ways Flavio's face with the bumps, the bruises, the blood, a lot of blood. And no way Flavio looks like Fabio at this moment.
Dan Spahn keeps coming at Flavio Magon.
But you got to give a lot of heart to Flavio. And in many ways, he's still there. He's standing. He's looking. He's trying to get a piece of his opponent. Kudos off to him. At this point, when you have fighters that, in many ways, have the experience with both wins and losses, they've been in situations here before. Flavio has every single chance to take this to the ground, or there you go, a stiff right at the face of Dan, and he's going for it. In many ways, with 1 minute left, he has nothing to lose. I think he needs to push forward and try and drop Dan to get the second round.
Yeah, at this point, I think Spahn's leading in the striking in round 3. Flavio coming forward, a nice takedown there, which takes away the knockout from Flavio Magon. It leaves the puncher's chance from the bottom. You can't knock somebody out from the bottom, but it's a hell of a lot more difficult.
Yes, and Flavio still has the chance to do many different submission attempts. He has the control right now. He needs to get some space and create a scramble and try and grab something. 30 seconds is a long time, but not a long time at all. Flavio needs to do something. This is where he does not want to be. And Dan, in many ways, can just stand up, get some posture, and tee away for the last 20 or less seconds.
Yeah, you got to think with the takedown in combination with the striking, Dan Spahn will be looking at a win here if it gets to the judges' scorecards. With 10 seconds left, he's looking to finish, and a big dropping right hand. Flavio gets back to his feet, and these guys throw to end the fight. Big smiles, big hugs from these two competitors in our main event. What a fight between Flavio Magon and Dan Spahn, who will likely pick up a decision victory here at Hard Knocks 53.